Now, in southern China, scientists have discovered ancient forests with animals and plants they thought were extinct in several sinkholes hidden deep in the mountains.
Beneath the rolling hills of southern China, engineers discovered something they could hardly believe. It was a hole so deep it seemed to swallow the earth itself. When they finally reached the floor, they didn't find rocks or ruins. Instead, it was something so shocking that it would astonish the entire world. A hole that shouldn't exist. In early 2022, a group of engineers were carrying out a regular land survey in Lehigh County, Guangxi, China. During their satellite scans, the team noticed something strange. It was a huge depression in the ground. It was far larger and deeper than anything they had ever seen in the region. What looked at first like a simple hole soon proved to be one of the biggest geological discoveries in years. Local villagers had long called this mysterious pit Heaven's Mouth. They told stories about birds disappearing whenever they flew across it, and about cool air blowing up from its depths. Many people dismissed were beginning to wonder if there was some truth in the old stories. When they arrived at the site, the engineers were stunned. The sinkhole was enormous, around 306 meters long, 150 meters wide, and nearly 200 meters deep. To imagine its size, think of a 60-story skyscraper fitting easily inside it. It is one of the largest sinkholes ever found anywhere in the world. From above, it looked endless. Even in daylight, the bottom was covered in total darkness. The team tried using drones fitted with cameras and lights to explore it, but every attempt failed. As soon as the drones went deep enough, they lost their signal, and their cameras could not capture anything in the thick blackness. It was as if the sinkhole refused to reveal its secrets. Still, the scientists needed to know what was down there. Was it dangerous? Could it collapse further or affect nearby villages? To find out, the engineers decided to drain the water that had gathered inside. It was a massive task. They brought in industrial pumps to slowly remove the water and used high-tech scanners to map the underground walls as the levels went down. What started as a normal geological check soon turned into a major research mission. Experts from across China, including top scientists from the China Geological Survey, joined the operation. Environmental researchers, cave specialists, and geologists all came to see what this strange hole might hold. As days passed and the water continued to drop, something unexpected began to appear. Through the mist rising from the depths, the team noticed a faint shade of green. At first, they thought it was a trick of light. Was there light coming from somewhere else? Was the ecosystem self-sustaining? The sinkhole had just gone from being a geological wonder to a biological mystery that challenged what scientists thought they knew about life beneath the earth. To understand how this hidden world came to exist, we first need to know what caused such a massive hole to form in the first place. The land that eats itself. Southern China's Guangxi region sits on one of the most unusual landscapes on Earth, a vast area of rock that slowly dissolves over time. The land here is mostly made of limestone, along with smaller amounts of dolomite and gypsum. These rocks don't just sit still. When rain falls, it mixes with carbon dioxide from the air and forms a weak acid. Over thousands and even millions of years, that slightly acidic water seeps into the ground and begins to dissolve the rock beneath. Scientists call this slow breakdown karstification, and it's what gives Guangxi its dramatic, uneven land full of cliffs, caves, and sinkholes. As rainwater and underground rivers carve their way through the rock, they create huge tunnels and caves deep below the surface. Some are so large that you could fit entire city blocks inside them, but this also makes the land above unstable. When the ceiling of a large cave becomes too thin to hold up its own weight, it eventually collapses, creating a massive hole at the surface. Locals call these giant holes tiankangs, which means heavenly pits. They're much deeper and steeper than normal sinkholes, and often have their own small forests and unique plants at the bottom. Guangxi has more of these giant sinkholes than anywhere else in the world, which is why scientists call it the sinkhole capital of Earth. The most famous one is the Shaozhai Heavenly Pit, the largest sinkhole ever discovered. But recently, experts have turned their attention to another incredible site, the newly discovered Tiankang in Lehigh County. It's not the biggest, but what scientists found inside has shocked them. When engineers began studying the Lehigh Pit, they realized it might be part of a much larger underground network. Evidence suggested that ancient rivers, which once flowed on the surface, had long ago shifted underground, continuing to carve out the rock below. Using high-tech imaging tools and drilling equipment, scientists confirmed that the limestone around the pit is still moving slightly, meaning the sinkhole is still growing. Every rainfall adds to the process, dissolving a little more rock and slowly expanding the underground void. Then came a discovery that no one expected. Instruments placed deep in the pit detected unusually high oxygen levels near the bottom, far more than what's normal in a deep, closed environment. Normally, air trapped that far underground becomes stale and oxygen poor, but this was different. High oxygen means something down there is producing it, likely plants performing photosynthesis. That single clue changed everything. It meant the bottom of the sinkhole might not be just a dark, lifeless pit. Instead, it could hold an entire hidden ecosystem, and the team was about to find out exactly what was hiding down there. The descent, entering the unknown. In May 2022, following weeks of meticulous planning, a joint team comprised of highly skilled engineers, seasoned cave explorers, and expert biologists assembled at the rim of the colossal sinkhole. Their collective mission was to undertake the first-ever human descent into the enigmatic depths of the Lai County Tiankang. The stakes were high, as no one truly knew what awaited them in the seemingly bottomless void. Every piece of equipment, every team member, and every step of the operation had been carefully chosen and rehearsed to ensure maximum safety and scientific integrity. To get down the steep limestone walls of the sinkhole, the engineers used strong safety ropes tied to firm anchors above. They carefully lowered themselves in stages, checking every step. Before anyone went in, they sent small drones with laser scanners to map the inside in 3D. These maps helped them plan the safest route and understand how deep and wide the sinkhole really was. They also used air sensors to check for dangerous gases and sudden temperature changes, making sure the air inside could be safely breathed. As the team began to descend, the world around them started to change. The air turned cooler, almost chilly, compared to the heat above. Bright sunlight faded quickly, replaced by a dim, bluish glow, and soon, total darkness. The explorers turned on their headlamps, their beams cutting through thick mist that hung in the air like fog. Through that haze, they began to see something that made their hearts race. There were 3 enormous cave openings, each carved into the walls, like doors leading into a hidden underground world. The deeper they went, the stronger the smell of wet earth and moss became. The walls glistened with thin mineral lines, shining under their lamps like veins of silver. These tiny patterns showed how water had shaped this place over thousands of years, slowly carving and layering the rock. The explorers realized they were not just looking at a sinkhole, but at the living memory of the Earth's own movements. After hours of slow climbing, they finally reached the bottom of about 192 meters deep. The ground was not hard stone as they expected, but covered with thick, moist soil. It felt alive under their boots. That soil, rich and soft, told them something extraordinary. Life might exist here, hidden from the world above. Their instruments soon confirmed traces of oxygen, moisture, and organic matter, which were signs that something was indeed growing in the dark. But what? When they raised their lights and swept the beams across the ground, the scene before them left them speechless. The team stood in awe. They hadn't just found a sinkhole, they had stepped into a secret world that had been hidden for centuries. The lost forest below. Imagine looking down into a giant hole in the ground, a hole so deep it seems to touch the sky. Then finding a hidden forest, completely untouched by people. This wasn't just a few trees, but a whole world of green, thriving in the darkness. The trees in this forest were incredibly tall, some reaching 40 meters high. To give you an idea, that's like a 13-story building. Their very tops were almost brushing the sunlight that managed to peek into the giant opening. It was a sight that few people have ever seen, a forest growing in a place you would never expect. This forest was like a time capsule. Everything about it suggested that humans had never set foot there. The ground was covered in a thick carpet of ferns. There were long vines hanging everywhere, and moss so soft and deep it felt like walking on blankets. It was a pristine environment, meaning it was perfectly clean and natural, just as nature intended. Scientists took samples of the soil, and what they found was fascinating. The soil was incredibly rich in nutrients from centuries of natural processes. Sediment, which is tiny bits of rock and dirt, had been falling from the sinkhole walls for a very long time. Minerals, carried by water, had also been dripping down. All of this had built up over hundreds of years, making the soil incredibly fertile and perfect for growing huge trees and lush plants. One of the most remarkable things about this hidden forest was its own special weather system. The dense canopy, which is the thick layer of leaves and branches at the top of the trees, created a microclimate. Think of it like a tiny, self-contained weather bubble. Inside this bubble, the air was humid, cool, and misty. These were the perfect conditions for plants to grow year-round, never getting too hot or too cold, and always having enough moisture. It was like a natural greenhouse, built by the forest itself. The engineers were incredibly excited. They believed that this isolated forest could be home to many undiscovered species. This means plants, fungi, and insects that no one has ever seen or studied before. Because the forest has been cut off from the rest of the world for so long, these species could have evolved in their own unique way. They might even be relics from prehistoric eras. It was like stepping into a living museum from the Earth's ancient past. The way sunlight entered the sinkhole is an incredible detail. Even though it is a deep hole, some sunlight managed to filter through the opening at the top. This created a perfect balance of light and shadow on the forest floor. This balance allowed the large plants and trees to grow tall and strong, getting just enough light without being overwhelmed by direct sun. As explorers went deeper into this green maze, they found something amazing: small streams of water. This meant the ecosystem was truly self-sustaining. It had its own water source, its own climate, and its own unique life forms. It was a complete world, sealed off from time, hidden beneath the surface of the earth. This natural wonder, however, also raised many new questions. How could something so massive and vibrant stay hidden in plain sight for so long? What secrets did it hold, and what could it teach us about Earth's history and the incredible power of nature? The geological puzzle. When the research team arrived at the site, the scientists immediately noticed something strange about the sinkhole's interior walls. Unlike most sinkholes, which have jagged, broken sides that look like the ground has simply collapsed, these walls were smooth, almost polished. It looked as though the rock had been carefully shaped, not shattered. That detail told them something important. A sudden collapse would have produced rough, uneven edges. Smooth walls meant the pit had been formed gradually, carved out over a very long time by running water. The scientists began to piece together what this meant. Over centuries, rainwater mixed with carbon dioxide from the air, turning slightly acidic. That water seeped into cracks in the limestone and slowly dissolved it, little by little, until the gaps became wide enough to form caves. As those caves expanded, sections of the ceiling eventually gave way, revealing the massive opening they were now standing inside. This was not a one-time event. It was the result of thousands of years of erosion, proof of how patient and powerful nature can be. To learn what lay beneath, the engineers used seismic scanning equipment, machines that send sound waves into the ground to create a detailed image of what's below. When the data came back, it stunned everyone. Behind the main pit were long tunnels and deeper chambers that extended beyond the visible walls. The sinkhole, they realized, wasn't an isolated feature. It was part of a massive underground network, possibly connecting to rivers and caves that stretched for miles. What they were seeing above the surface was only the entrance to something much larger and more complex. Next, the team collected water samples from several points inside the sinkhole. They wanted to know whether water still flowed underground or if the system had gone dormant. The results showed that the groundwater was chemically stable and continuously moving, a clear sign that an active underground river was still alive beneath the forest floor. This was a critical discovery. It explained how the vegetation inside the pit could survive so well. The trees and plants weren't relying only on rainfall. They were being fed from below by a constant supply of fresh, mineral-rich water. That steady flow of groundwater created a perfect balance between geology and life. Because of this combination of features, smooth, ancient walls, active water flow, and a self-sustaining ecosystem, scientists began calling the sinkhole a living laboratory. It offered them a rare opportunity to observe how geology, water, and biology interact in a closed environment. Another finding surprised the engineers. The structure was remarkably stable. Despite its massive size, there were no new cracks or signs of shifting in the limestone walls. Normally, you'd expect erosion or small collapses to keep changing the shape of a sinkhole, but not here. The data showed no movement. That meant this formation had likely reached a balanced state. It wasn't expanding quickly anymore. In fact, it might remain standing for hundreds of years. For researchers, this was good news. It meant the site could be studied safely and in detail for a long time. But there was still one mystery they couldn't solve: the age of the forest growing at the bottom. This was no young forest that had recently taken root. It looked ancient, as though it had been thriving in isolation long before humans ever knew the pit existed. That single observation raised a bigger question. If the vegetation had been growing undisturbed for so long, then the sinkhole itself must have been open for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years. Its existence challenged what scientists thought they knew about how quickly karst landscapes can form and evolve. The mysteries of the sinkhole were profound, and to truly understand its significance, the team needed the best minds in the field. That's when Zhang Yuanhai, a senior engineer from the Institute of Karst Geology of the China Geological Survey, joined the investigation. Zhang Yuanhai was not just any expert. He was a leading authority on karst formations, making him the perfect person to unravel the sinkhole's secrets. The expert's revelation. When China's top karst expert, Zhang Yuanhai, arrived at the Leia sinkhole, the research team paused their work. Zhang had studied limestone formations for decades, and his reputation in China's geological community was unmatched. Everyone knew that his assessment would determine just how extraordinary this discovery truly was. He began his inspection immediately. From the rim of the sinkhole, he and his team deployed high-resolution cameras and laser mapping equipment to survey the interior walls. The first features that drew his attention were 3 large cave openings positioned at different heights. To the untrained eye, they looked like dark hollows carved into the rock. But to Zhang, they represented the entire geological story of the formation. Each opening was shaped with a precision that only water could create. The entrances were nearly symmetrical and smooth around the edges, showing clear and consistent erosion patterns that revealed steady underground flow over thousands of years. The uppermost cave was the widest and formed a graceful, natural arch. Moisture still glistened on its interior walls in the camera footage, suggesting that powerful streams of water had once passed through it under immense pressure. The second cave lay deeper in the wall and tilted slightly toward the northeast. Around its rim, Zhang identified thin layers of sediment built up over time, evidence of ancient riverbeds that had long since run dry. The lowest and largest cave sat near the sinkhole floor, where faint reflected light revealed mineral deposits along its walls. Airflow readings taken by remote sensors showed a steady current of cool air emerging from the opening, carrying the chemical signature of moisture and organic material, proof that the system remained active. Using field instruments such as light meters, echo sounding devices, and temperature sensors, Zhang confirmed that all 3 openings were still functioning. The air movement inside them was slow but constant, showing that these were not sealed chambers, but part of a continuing geological process. The data showed small differences in air temperature and pressure between each cave, indicating connections to deeper voids and possibly a vast subterranean drainage network. To Zhang, this discovery changed everything. It proved that the Lai sinkhole was not simply a collapsed depression in the ground. It was the surface window of a much larger karst system that was still alive and changing. The erosion that had sculpted these openings was still taking place, unseen, beneath the rock. The formation was expanding, shifting, and quietly reacting to the forces within. But the deeper the data went, the clearer it became that this fragile balance could easily be disturbed. What Zhang would uncover next would threaten to undo everything they had just discovered. The collapse. 2 weeks later, Zhang Yuanhai returned to the site after hearing reports that unauthorized work had resumed near the sinkhole. As soon as he arrived, he saw several trucks parked near the rim and groups of workers moving equipment across the site. The sound of machinery carried through the forest. Unauthorized excavation had clearly begun again. Survey poles and ropes stretched across the area, showing that preparations for a tourist platform were already underway. Zhang immediately recognized the danger. The limestone surrounding the sinkhole was thin and unstable. The vibrations from drilling and heavy machinery could easily travel through the ground and cause stress deep below the surface. To assess the damage, Zhang ordered new imaging scans of the sinkhole's interior using drones and remote cameras. The footage confirmed his worst fears. Along the wall near the largest of the 3 cave openings, several new fractures had appeared. The cracks extended outward in multiple directions, cutting across the smooth limestone like spreading veins. Fine dust was visible along the edges of the fractures, a sign that the rock was shifting and crumbling in real time. The once stable formation was now under dangerous strain. The structure that had held for centuries was failing, and the pressure inside the rock was building rapidly. When Zhang reviewed the surface conditions, the cause was obvious. The unauthorized workers had been digging trenches and installing metal supports for a planned viewing platform. Their drilling had shaken the ground continuously for days. He concluded that these vibrations had triggered the new fractures seen in the drone footage. What nature had formed slowly over thousands of years had been destabilized in less than a week. Zhang immediately ordered the workers to stop. He warned that even minor surface activity could send shockwaves through the weakened limestone and cause the entire structure to collapse. The cracks were not harmless surface marks. They were active fault lines spreading through the rock. He threatened to report the illegal operation to the central authorities. The workers halted and withdrew, but Zhang knew they would return. Once the site was quiet, another crew would eventually take their place. His final report was blunt. The limestone was under severe pressure, and continued interference would cause total failure. The fractures were expanding at an unnatural rate, and the next collapse would not be gradual. The event would happen suddenly, destroying the entire formation in minutes. He wrote that the underground forest would be the first to die. When the ceiling failed, the falling rock would crush the roots and tear open the soil. The violent rush of air and debris would suffocate everything below. Oxygen would disappear, heat and gases would rise, and the hidden ecosystem would rot in complete darkness. Nothing would survive. What do you think about this sinkhole? Comment down below.